Hello and welcome to another episode of 33 Conversations. I'm your host, Michael Abney. We talk to founders about their mission in life, how it's going, what they're building. Building something meaningful in the world often requires us to let go of the things that got us there in life, and sometimes that causes resistance in our life. And today I am really honored to have somebody on my podcast that specializes in something I think we've all been through is when we know that we want something, we have all the tools, we think we're ready, but yet we don't act on that. And today we got an expert in the house, Mr. Kam Knight. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, how did the subject of like what you're talking about? First of all, I want to know way more about it, but the idea of that space that we all may not have the words for that you've got, but we all have felt that moment where it seemed like everything was right, but yet there was still something I've experienced in my own life, and it wasn't till many times in my life, but every time for me, it's always some sort of deepening connection to my mission or something that pulls me forward. So I'm really super interested, we're all talking about that resistance that we have to taking the next step.
Yeah.
And
sure.
So I'm excited to hear your take on that. How did that come to be for you?
All right, sure. I'll just quickly introduce myself and I'll talk about what it is I do and how I got to doing that. So my name is Kam Knight. I am a mentor, international speaker, and author of a dozen books in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. Now I talk about a concept that answers a question I had my whole life, which is, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. So in a lot of ways, I have all the tools and I have the solutions, but I'm not putting the tools or solutions into practice. So how it all started is, for most of my life, I was a fairly driven individual. And what I tell people is it's kind of hard not to be, because nowadays there's so much personal development and people are always telling you to do more and be your best self, whether it's on some sort of feed on Instagram, whether it's in a movie, whether it's Oprah, or just really society at large. And growing up, I always wanted to do more, have more, and be more in life. And although I had my fair share of success, in a lot of ways, I felt like I fell short, missed the mark, or the success was much more difficult and stressful than it had to be. And I wondered why that was. Like I said, why is it if I know what to do and I have the solutions, for some reason or other, I can't do it? And unfortunately, at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answer I came across was related to beliefs, that you need to have positive beliefs, or that you may have limiting beliefs, or that you need motivation and discipline. And I think they are an important piece of the puzzle, though I think they're a much smaller piece than people realize. And unfortunately, that question lingered in my mind for the last 15 to 20 years. Every time I fall stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the more books I read, the more coaching I did, the more seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain and human behavior. And over time, I had this epiphany. And I remember when it happened exactly. I was at a Brendan Burchard seminar, and he had a speaker talking about identity and how if you don't do, or if what you're doing is not in line with your identity, your brain will prevent progress. And based on that and everything I'd heard prior, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a part of our mind designed to hold us back. there's a part of our brain built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance, and is this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, you should stick with it. That's actually true. Like the $1 million question. So like that actually did happen. That happened to me when my dad passed away. My everything that I thought I was like, it went away, and I spent 30 years fixing myself, realizing there was nothing wrong. Like the whole thing collapsed. It was
Yeah.
scary, but at the same time, I was aware enough that I knew that I could create what I wanted my identity to be, not what the past had told me to be about it. So mine happened by force. I mean, well, the force of nature, like just life happening, but all of it culminated in that moment to cause that break. I literally wrote a book about it called Identity is Fluid. So I 1,000% know exactly what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
how did you break that? What was the question or code that you broke that for yourself without having an external event? Or did you have an external event that popped that open for you?
Yeah. So what's really important to understand with resistance, it's not just identity related. So identity is one piece of it. And the way resistance works is we have one part of the brain that creates wants and another part that gives us the green light to act on that want. So this is really important. One part actually is responsible for creating wants and desires, and it's more or less creating endless wants one after another. It doesn't check to see if you have the time, energy, or resources to achieve the want. It simply creates wants. And in many ways, it was never meant to do anything more than that. And so, in a lot of ways, it's really just out there creating endless wants one after another without any sort of restraint or checking to see if we have the time, energy, resources, or if it's safe or worth doing. And then we have another part of the brain that evaluates the want to make sure that we have the time, energy, resources, and all of that to do it. And so anytime we have a want and desire, this part of the brain, which I call resistance, analyzes a want using a whole host of criteria. And if that desire is not in line with any of the criteria, it will prevent action. So it really helps to think about standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every time a desire comes up, it goes through all of them. And if even one of the members is against the idea, it won't pass. So what's really important to understand about resistance is that it is possible for a person's brain, one brain, to both create a desire for something and at the same time keep us from going after it. And so a lot of times when people experience this tug of war where they're wondering if they should do this and then saying maybe not, or they're deciding between two different things, it's really because of this. There's one part of the brain that's creating want and another part is saying no. And what's even more important to understand is that the identity piece is really one criteria that the brain evaluates. There's other things that go on as well. It could really be related to beliefs. As I mentioned when I first got into this, the biggest reason for what was holding us back that was being talked about had to do with limiting beliefs. And again, there's more to it than just beliefs and identities. It can go into a whole host of criteria. And in my work, I found there's at least a good 25 to 30 criteria which deal with authority issues, self-image, how peers from our past may think or perceive us. It goes into demographics, even inner child, and all of that. And so if we're just talking in terms of identity, plus if we're trying to do something that goes against our identity, resistance will arise. And if our identity gets pulled from under us, then it's hard to do anything because the brain doesn't really know what our identity is. It doesn't know what we should be doing or what we should not be doing. And yes, I did confront this identity thing a couple times. And oftentimes I do get asked, does one ever get over the resistance completely? And I say no, because every time we grow or we want to do something new and different, resistance will rise. And because there are different criterias, we hit up against those criterias. So when we're doing one thing, let's say when we're going through school or college, we hit up certain criteria of our resistance. But then when we graduate or when we're shifting our career, or maybe we want to become a writer or an author, then we hit up other causes of resistance. And so when I was thinking about becoming an author and writing and wanting to publish a book, I hit up one of the resistance related to identity, because being a writer wasn't my identity. My identity was being an accountant, the numbers person, and writing and words was a whole different realm. And so it took much longer and much harder than it needed to be to write my first book and get it out there, because resistance was showing up. And why was it showing up? There was many reasons, but one of them had to do with the fact that I was hitting up against my identity. I hope that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense. I have a question. So, have you figured a way out of it? Or you figured a way to be with it? Or what? So that's obviously a problem, right? So how is your research or your what you've got provide a solution? Or what is the solution?
Yeah. So this is a question that helps to ask a little bit later down the road, so we can understand resistance a little more. And the first thing I would say is, when it comes to overcoming resistance, we need to work on the cause of the resistance. And a lot of times people are using cookie cutter solutions, or we'll hear a tip and technique that says it'll help us move past this block or help us take action and overcome procrastination. And it works for some people, and oftentimes it doesn't work for a lot of people. And that's because it is addressing a specific resistance. And for a person who has that resistance, it ends up working for them and they can move forward. And then oftentimes we'll see that person using a tip or technique, and then when we try it and it doesn't work, we feel a little discouraged because we see it working for someone else, but it's not. And the reason it likely doesn't work for us is, one, it's likely not the same resistance that we have. Or if it is the same resistance, we might have a couple other layers of resistance that we need to address before we can actually have progress. And so a lot of times people kind of
like a minefield.
Yeah.
And it's like all these little bombs that you don't even know where they're at or where they came. It's like, yeah, I totally understand like the feel that you're, and kudos to you for taking this on too. This is a space where you got to be really present, right? Like when you're working with people, because we're in the middle and we're all mirrors of each other, and you had to probably develop yourself in a way that you become pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Like you don't have any buttons to press, right? Because we're dealing with, like, when you're in somebody's consciousness where you're working with them like this, that's a really delicate space. I'll put it like that, because I've done it for 30 years, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. There's no defense mechanism there. It is what it is. How did that happen? I know that that's a hard thing to master. So like, where did that come from?
So I think one of the reasons I've gotten so good at the topic of resistance is because I've had a lot of resistance in my life that I've had to work through. And like I said, I wanted to do something and I would feel stuck and I'd wonder why. and I'd go learn something or try something. And a lot of stuff worked, but because I had so many layers, I had to work through so many layers. And because I had to work through so many layers, I
Mm-hmm.
realized the depth of the complex nature that the brain creates in terms of deciding what we can or what we can't do. So in the beginning, I did have a
Yeah.
lot of limiting beliefs. And what's interesting about beliefs isn't just about what you think is possible, but what you think is possible for you. So you might think something is possible to do or it's possible to have success with. Like, yes,
Yeah.
it's possible to write a book and publish it and be successful. But then when you go to write it, you may have a deep down underlying core belief. It's so core you don't notice it that doesn't believe it's possible for you. So as you start writing, this deep down feeling that doesn't believe it's possible starts to create roadblocks and makes things harder than it is. So then I had to work through my own beliefs. And then as I'm making progress, I am moving out of my comfort zone. And the brain doesn't like when we move out of our comfort zone. They talk about
I
comfort
hate
zone
it.
being a zone of comfort, but it's really not a zone of comfort. It's actually a zone of familiar. And that's because majority of our comfort zones aren't actually comfortable. They're actually painful and often annoying. But we stay in them because part of the brain knows what we can do and expect, and it's okay with that, even though it's painful. And anytime we do anything, especially something new, we're going to move out of the comfort zone. And then a part, yeah, the warning starts going off to resistance, like, uh-oh, we're moving out of that. So then I work through that. And then there is also another reason for resistance has to do with self-image. So a lot of people have created a self-image of themselves where they see themselves as cool, smart, tech savvy, or that they have this great story or they're this great artist and musician. But they'll
Mm-hmm.
rarely apply themselves or put themselves out there because if they experience difficulty, then they have to face the fact that they're not this great self-image they created for themselves. So I was dealing with
Yeah.
that as well. I had this self-image that I knew what I was talking about, or I had some answers and solutions, right? But then as I'm writing my book or wanting to talk about it, a part of my starting to feel like, oh wow, if people don't resonate or like what I have to say or it doesn't work, I have to face the fact that I'm not as smart or cool as I think I am. And so it's much
Yeah.
easier not to do the thing and hold on to that self image
Mm-hmm.
than to do it and prove myself wrong. So then there's another layer of why resistance would come up. And here's another
Yeah.
layer that doesn't get talked about, but a lot of times resistance to a task or activity, and we'll use a running example of writing a book, comes up not because of the task or activity, but what finishing or completing it would lead to or bring. So in the case of writing a book is already hard, but once you finish it, you experience some bigger
Definitely. Yeah.
challenges in one,
Yeah.
marketing it, and two, more importantly, receiving feedback and criticism. Because once your book is out there, you're going to receive feedback and criticism. So oftentimes,
Yeah.
if a person is sensitive to feedback and criticism, their brain will have them procrastinate and sabotage them on finishing the book now so they don't have to face something bigger later. And in this case, it's feedback and criticism. So that's another resistance I hit up again. And there are just layers too. One that doesn't get talked about, which I think would be really helpful for your audience to hear, has to do with authority issues. Authority issues relate to our unconsciously held attitudes toward authority figures such as parents, principals, priests, police officers, and even personal development coaches and mentors like ourselves. And so what happens is if a person is growing up where they're constantly being told what to do, what not to do, how to do it, and how not to do it, whether it's with parents, teachers, and other people, at a certain point, their brain gets fed up and doesn't want to listen to or do anything it's told. And even if we grow up and want to do those things, like it's going to be helpful for us and even healthy, our brain won't let us do it because the authority issue response kicks in. So I had that growing up. I had a lot of people in my life always telling me what to do. And at a certain point, I didn't want to listen to them. And in a way, I became kind of destructive because a lot of the things they were telling me was helpful and beneficial. And as I grew up and I wanted to do those things, including becoming successful, especially with this book, the authority response would come in and make things more difficult and harder for me. So that was another layer of resistance. So to circle back to your question of like, how I got into this or how I dealt with it is because I had so many layers to work through and I got a lot of experience in, getting blocked every time I was taking the next step and the processes of me wanting to move forward in life, whether it was with the book or with help or in business or in my career, I kind of got a really deep understanding of resistance. And now I can kind of see it in other people. It's almost very obvious when I'm working with someone to the point where I can just hear a few words of what they're saying and I could just see the whole dynamic that's playing out for them unconsciously. How the various belief systems, identity, their upbringing has led them to articulate those words in that way. And so I try to help them understand those things. But the challenge of resistance is that resistance is really good at stopping us from moving forward. It's so good at stopping us that it will shut out advice and instructions from people. And what's really crazy is even though a person goes out of their way to learn new information and hires coaches and experts, if they don't resolve the resistance will shut down their advice. I know a lot of people, and I did this myself. I would pay good money for advice, and then I would shut it down because, So this is how it kind of really gotten deep insight into the topic and also seeing it in other people.
Well, that's how. Thank you for going through all of that. And, but now that I'm just curious, that one final question I'd like to ask you is that now that you've overcome those things and now your life produced, selling books and having it actually show up, how did that impact you when that flipped and when the evidence outside started to match your new reality? How did that? Was that uncomfortable at first until you get used to it?
It is that's a very good question. And I don't get asked it a lot. And that made me just hit another resistance I had deep down. So I had feelings of undeserving and not enough or not being good enough. So a lot of why I was doing what I was doing, in many ways, I was trying to feel deserving and to feel good enough. So I wanted to do well in school so I can get a good job, make good money to feel deserving and good enough. And I did all that and I still didn't, which is why I wanted to write a book. Maybe if I wrote a book and it was successful, well, first it was like, if I can write a book, and I did write that book and I did get it published. And it's like my mind was leading me on with that carrot on a stick, the carrot on a stick. And I got the book, still didn't feel it. Then I started doing well with sales, still didn't feel it. Then wrote another book, still didn't feel it. So there was another layer of resistance I had. So although I got that success that I was hoping for, and even more, now I've written a dozen books that have gotten over 10,000 ratings on Amazon. I've sold well over 500,000 copies. And you would think I would feel good enough, but I didn't. And because I didn't, I kept taking it to the next level. And it's really how I developed this concept of internal resistance. After my 10th book, this is when my idea of internal resistance were coming up. And even though I developed this concept, and I think it really does a great job of answering a question that a lot of us has. Not only that, but it kind of answers a lot of gaps in psychology, especially how the different models really fit together in a nice way. And I do feel that this model of resistance does that. Still wasn't enough. And so that was another thing to work through. And I know a lot of people experience that where they are doing what they're doing, not necessarily or always because they like or enjoy it. That's part of it. But also they are trying to feel better or deserving or to feel like they are good enough and worthy enough. And they keep chasing success to feel that way, but no matter what they achieve, they don't feel that way. So that was another layer that I did hit up against. And so to answer your question, when I did get there, like, what was it like? Well, that's what it was like for me. It was like, it didn't feel like I actually did anything. Even though I put in all that hard work, went through the heartaches and heartbreaks and the inner turmoil, and I got to that level, it was like, well, yeah, but other people have written books too. Then I had to do something that other people had done.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe they haven't sold as many books as you, but there's some who've sold more books than you. It's like, okay. So it is kind of interesting. And this actually brings up a great cause of resistance that I don't get a chance to talk about. And it'll be a good time to talk about it. And as I mentioned, anytime we want to do something, that desire gets evaluated by resistance using a whole host of criteria. And there's many criteria resistance will evaluate. And I went through a few of them, including beliefs, comfort zones, self-image, authority issues. But there's one criteria, and that has to do with the fact that what we're wanting to do or the outcome we're wanting to have is not going to change our lives as much as we think or people lead us to believe. So anytime we set out to do something, for a lot of us, our brain has a way of making the outcome seem much bigger and more grand than the reality. Like everyone will love us and all of our problems will magically go away forever. And it doesn't help that media, advertisements, and Disney movies reinforce this. And the reality is not much changes. You'll still be the same person. And if people, care about your success, it's mainly because they're jealous and want what you have. And more importantly, your life isn't going to be flipped upside down. You still have to go grocery shopping, take the car to the mechanic, deal with health problems, and even the rejection of others. And in many ways, resistance knows this. Resistance knows deep down not much is going to change. So it doesn't see the point in putting in all this time, effort, and energy if things will be the same. It reasons why put in more work, add more effort, and go out of our comfort zone if things will be the same. And in many ways, it does help to understand that a lot of times when we are going out to do something, a lot of times we're doing it because we think it's going to change our lives or it's going to change how we feel about ourselves. And it more often than not, it doesn't do that. And if we're blocked, it's because a part of our brain knows it's not going to change much. And so it reasons why put in all this effort or go out of our comfort zone and take on more risk when things will be the same. And so if a person can realize that if what they're doing is trying to magically flip their life upside down, more than likely it's not going to happen, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go after it. It just means that the expectation isn't aligned. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't write that book. It means you should still do it. Just know that Oprah's not going to be calling you once you do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, this is an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. It's like your passion for continuing to pull back the onion, you just kept pulling back the onion and the onion and the onion. So most people don't ever take the time to actually put the work in. So I appreciate it. And then being able to articulate that back is really super powerful. So I appreciate it. And it's been eye-opening. So where can people find your work at?
Yeah, so I've got 3 free gifts for all the listeners here. One is called Prompt Engineering for Your Mind. People don't realize
Okay.
that the original Chat GPT was your brain, and we can actually
Mm-hmm.
prompt it to not only give us solutions, but actually take action on those solutions. So it's an easy way to overcome resistance. The second is with a second guide is called um, I'm blanking right now. Build habits and behaviors in your sleep. So it's possible to actually do a lot of the things that we're wanting to do by taking physical brute action, just by using a simple technique that I discuss in this guide that can actually help us create the habits and behaviors to move us in a more forward direction. And then the third guide is on this topic of internal resistance, and it's called End Procrastination and Sabotage. And it goes deeper into our conversation, talking about how our own wants can cause resistance, other causes of resistance that we didn't get a chance to discuss here, and then also how our resistance shows up. It shows up in tricks, and you'll know what I mean in that guide. And so you can get all
Awesome.
3 free guides on my website at kamknight.com. And if anybody
Okay.
wants to do one-on-one work with me, one of the reasons I was able to go so deep is because I figured out a way to break the barrier between the conscious and unconscious mind. So I can take people into their unconscious mind. It's not hypnosis or NLP, it's a method I developed. And we work on the resistance inside the unconscious mind, dealing with the exact resistance a person has to the specific areas that they want to work on and improve. So if a person is interested in that, they can reach out to me at mentor@kamknight.com.
Awesome. I'll include those links in the description box below. But appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with us today on
Yeah,
32
thank you very much,
Conversations.
Malcolm.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. Hope you guys got an absolute ton out of this. I know I did. I'm gonna start peeling back the onion right after this call. You guys got to have an amazing conversation with somebody you know, somebody you don't know. Just go have a conversation. Connect. We'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.